Africa Enlightenment Center, religious, political, and social enlightenment. Hello, pay attention as Matt and Phil drill a Christian and make him understand the reason why atheism is a better default than theism. Watch video to the end, make sure to subscribe and share this video. Don't forget to comment your opinion in the comment section.
We've got another Georgia caller. Paul is here from Georgia. You're on with Phil and Matt. How are you?
Okay. How are you guys today?
Pretty good.
Fantastic.
Says you want to know why we think atheism is a better default than deism or theism?
Well, yes, generally, I seem like I heard you guys talk, or one of you, Matt, talk about this another time. And sure. I don't think I understood fully what your reasons were, why you thought that should be the default position.
Well, maybe you'll understand. I'll let Phil do it because maybe I wasn't clear.
So, Paul, let me ask you: Are you a Christian or not a Christian?
I am.
So that's yes, you are a Christian.
Yes, I'm a Christian.
Okay. Do you believe in the Norse god Thor?
No.
Okay. Why not?
I don't think there's any good evidence that.
There you go. You just answered the question. Is that you don't have evidence for Thor, so you just don't believe it. You're not saying Thor doesn't exist. You're not saying Thor can't be possible. You're saying I don't know. I don't have any evidence. That's what atheism is. I don't have any evidence for the existence of any particular deity, and further, I have not seen any evidence at all for any kind of Christian God. But if you have evidence, I'd be happy to review it and reconsider my position. But I'm not taking a position against God. I've just seen no evidence for it.
Well, before we get to that, the thing, just so that it's clear, is that you had a default position on Thor that it's not worth believing in Thor until there's evidence for it, right?
Correct.
You answered your own question, because your question was, why do we think that atheism is the better default position? You do the same thing because you don't believe in Thor until there's evidence. You don't believe in Zeus until there's evidence. I'm assuming you don't believe in, that Muhammad was divine until there's evidence. All these other things. You are starting with the same default position. The only difference between the two of us is that you've evidently become convinced of a God, and Phil and I, well, actually have been convinced in the past and are no longer convinced.
Right. No, I get that. I guess really the core of the reason I was wanting to ask this question is it seems like that there are, as best as I can tell, and maybe you can correct me if I'm mistaken about this, but it seems like that there are 4 categories of explanations for the world as we know it and the existence of life. Either there's 0 gods, 1 God, more than 1 God, or everything is God. And when I look at those possibilities, and if there's other possibilities I haven't thought of, and I'll be glad to hear what your thoughts are, but all of those seem like really unlikely options, including my own. I do not think that if it seems like to me there ought to be another choice because every option seems bad.
Sure.
In terms of,
and Paul, what I would put this down to is that if you don't like any of those possibilities, which is perfectly fine, that's cool. Then the answer you might give if someone asks you, where does the world come from? You could just say, I don't know. And you stop there. You stop with what you don't know.
I can appreciate that. But the thing that seems mistaken about stopping there is if it didn't matter what the implications were for believing one thing or another, then fine. But there are implications for every different one of these categories. Yeah. And it does matter what we believe.
It would be nice to think you got it right. Yeah, it'd be nice to think you got it right. So why on earth do you think you've got it right and we don't?
When I look at what exists, the thing that is the most compelling to me is my own consciousness. I cannot get away from that. And so I have to reject the explanation that we're all part of the same God or some kind of one experience. I reject that because it just departs completely from my own experience. And so when I look at the other options of either there's no God, or there's one eternal God, or there's more than one eternal God, and I look at what's here, I could swallow the idea of evolution 100 times before I could accept the idea that the first cell just sprang out of nothing.
That's not, nobody's saying that. You would be right.
Well, or not sprang out of nothing that came from.
You would be correct.
It came from no.
You would be correct. You would be warranted to accept evolution because evolution is a fact, and the theory of evolution by means of natural selection is the model that describes that fact to the best of our ability. So it's far more reasonable for you to accept that than the proposition that the first cell sprang out of nothing. However, no one in the history of science has ever suggested that a cell sprang forth out of nothing.
Right. And maybe I phrased that poorly. I guess what I should have said is something more along the lines of that a living cell that had the ability to replicate and mutate and process either food or had photosynthetic abilities, something of that level of complexity had to exist in order for the evolutionary process to get started.
Well, and I think what I see here, and this was a fascinating thing for me when I was growing up, is that maybe if you had some classes on biology or chemistry and had a much deeper understanding of how those things work, it wouldn't feel like such an impossible mystery. It just kind of like I can't remember the story where someone went back in the past into King Arthur's court and predicted an eclipse, and they thought they had magical powers. They just knew that this was going to happen. And sometimes there's a lot to know and a lot to understand, and it makes it so difficult to understand it that it might be actually easier for our brains to just say, that can't be the way it happened. Well, you not being able to fully understand it doesn't make it less or more likely, but if you do study it, it might make it easier to kind of to swallow, I guess, as a worldview.
Welcome back. Phil and Matt did a great job right there, trying to help the Christian guy come to understand the reason why atheism is a better default than theism. So they made the guy to answer his own question. See that? They helped the guy to answer his own question. And they did a very good job right there. Yeah, if you love the video, you enjoyed the video, you can support us. All right. Just click thanks and buy thanks to support what we're doing, because more is coming your way. Thank you for watching.